In this movie, I'm going to show you the solution that I came up with to the create a log file assignment. Now, if you haven't completed that assignment yet, I encourage you to try it on your own first. It's one of the best ways you're going to learn how to put all of these pieces together. And then once you have, you can review my solution and see how close we are. They may not be exact, and that's okay. There are a lot of different ways that you can approach these problems, but I'll show you mine. So the first requirement of the assignment was to make sure that we had a logs directory and to make sure that it was available to the web server. In this case, I made sure that the web server actually owns that file. www is my web server. Yours might be something else. The other way to approach it would be to set the permissions on that file to something different. Mine are set so that the owner has read and write privileges to it. Other people just have read privileges. We could change those, and if it wasn't the owner, then we certainly would need to make everyone, for example, be also read and write. But once we have the log file set up, then we're all set to move on to the second requirement. The second requirement was for us to code this log action inside functions.php. And you'll see that the first thing I did was I figured out where that log file ought to be. Even though it doesn't necessarily exist yet, where will it be? And I used siteroot and ds to say, well, it's in the logs directory, and it will be called log.txt. Now, the way I decided to write the file was using append. Now, append, one of its features is that if the file does not already exist, it will create it for you. If it does exist, it'll just grab it, open it up, and start appending at the end. Well, that's nice because it actually saves me from having to check whether the file exists or not. I went ahead and did a file exist check here and said, well, let's check and see if it's new. And the reason why is because once I'm done with all my writing, I decided to do a chmod at the end to say, well, make sure that the log file is 0755. Now, that's an optional step. You don't have to do those two steps. I went ahead and did it. Append has that functionality built in already where it will either create a new one or append to the end of the old one. So I open it up in append mode. So I'm all set. The pointer's at the end of the file, ready to write. I went ahead and figured out what my timestamp would be using the string ftime function, using just PHP's time. We saw how to do that earlier. And then I assembled the content that I wanted to output all together into a variable. And I said, we're going to put the timestamp, then a pipe, one of those upright bars, the action, colon, and then the message, and then new line at the end. Notice that, the \n, and that's in double quotes. Double quotes are important because we're using this special character. And then I write that content to the file, close the file, and we're all set. Now, of course, if it wouldn't open up for some reason, then we say just a simple error message, could not open it up. So that's all there is to writing the log action. And now we can call that action whenever we want. And here we'll do that in our login.php. We just simply say log action, and then login we'll call, and then what are we going to pass in? We'll pass in the username and the logged in as the message. And that's all there is to it. Now we can log things to the log file that easily. So that takes care of the second part of the assignment that I gave you, which was to write that log action and use it. And then the next thing we want to do is be able to read that log file back in. I went ahead and said where we should be able to find the log file. Now, since we have this in both places, potentially this could be something that we'd set up in our config so that we could look in our configuration and know where the log file is instead of having to repeat it several times throughout our code. But for now, this will do. Now, we'll come back to the get clear part. That was the fourth part of the assignment. The third part is to read in that log file. So we know where the log file is. So down here in the HTML, I've got a bit of PHP that's going to check to see, does the file exist? Is it readable? And can we open it? So if all three of those things return true, then great, we can keep going. We're ready to read in the file. But if it doesn't exist, or if it's not readable, or if we have a problem opening it for any reason, we'll go down here to the else statement, could not read from the log file. Now, let's assume that it works. In most cases, it should. I decided to do it with some CSS. So I went ahead and had a UL just for an unordered list, and then each of the items I decided would be LIs. So it'll be a nice HTML list that we could potentially style then with style sheets. So here's the important part though. I do the loop until we get to the end of the file, while not equal to the end of the file, get each line. And I decided to use fgets. You could have used fread or something that would have been fine. The reason fgets works so well is because we know that each line in the log file has a new line return after it. We don't necessarily know how long it is, but we know that there's a new line. So fgets handles that for us. It says, get the next bit of information until you get to a new line. So for line-by-line files, fgets is the best way to go. And then I went ahead and added a little bit of text here, an if statement, before I actually output the entry. the reason I decided to do that was that this makes sure that there's not a new line return without something else there. And I discovered that I needed that when I started clearing the log file. Sometimes I would have an extra new line return, and I was getting an li tag with nothing in it. And I said, well, it would be a nice improvement here if I simply just trimmed any white space from entry. And if there is something there besides just, nothing after we've trimmed away the white space, then output the entry. That's optional. And then the fourth part of the assignment was this clearing the log file. So I pretty much gave you what the link tag should be to make that happen. The part that you really need to code is up here. If get clear equals true, let me just expand this, and you'll see file put contents is what I decided to use. And I told the log file, put the contents, nothing in that file. So I wanted to use file put contents here so you could see a place where it's really useful. Remember, this is a shorthand way that we can write to the file. Now, I could have also opened up the file using overwrite and written in the file logs cleared. I decided to go ahead and do it with this one line, clear out the log file by putting nothing in it, and then add in that first log entry saying that the logs were cleared. And finally, I said redirect to. You'll see why that's true in a second when we try this out. It'll redirect to the same page so that the URL won't have clear equals true anymore in it. We'll see that in action. Let's take a look. So I'll go and open up a new Firefox window, and we'll go to localhost, photo gallery public, and then where I want to go is actually into admin login.php. And we'll try that out. Now I'm going to log in as K Skoglund with secret pwd. That was my password, secret pwd. Now I'm logged in. It should have logged that. Let's take a look at our log file, view log file. And sure enough, here we are. We've got some old logs there. We've got the new entry that I just created. And if I click create log file, it then clears out the logs and we start over again. Now I wanted to show you what I mean by that last redirect here. Let's take that out for a second. And let's just reload the page, log file, okay? And let's clear the log file. Now, because I didn't redirect, notice here that clear is equal to true. That might cause us to inadvertently clear the log file again. So by redirecting instead, I make sure that I clear out that parameter that was sent so that now, once we've cleared it, it's gone and it has to actually click the link in order to get that clearing effect again. So while that wasn't part of the assignment, that is just a good practice to be in to keep track of what is up in that URL string, because that is something that the user could, reload the page, they could bookmark it. So if you don't want something sort of dangerous or destructive up in there, you want to make sure that you don't leave it up in there. So hopefully you got the same results and you got it working. If not, go back, rewind the movie, see what I did, try it on your own till you get it right. When you're ready, I'll meet you in the next chapter where we'll talk about uploading files via a web form.